Well, since 1944, really, in the Bretton Woods agreements, the United States power as a geopolitical power has rested on two foundations. One is, from that point on, it was very clear to the leading circles in the US establishment, America will have the supreme military might in the world. The dropping of the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was a statement not to end the war with Japan. It was a statement to tell Russia, to tell Stalin and the rest of the world, we have this horrifying weapon and we're not hesitant to use it on innocent civilians. So we are the number one power on the block. Don't anybody get in our way. Now, the second pillar of support for that global hegemony, Henry Luce of Time Life magazine called it, in the 40s, he called it the American century. The second pillar of the American century, up until now, has been, and this is something few people understand, the role of the American dollar since 1944 in the Bretton Woods Agreement as world reserve currency for world trade, for central bank reserves against world trade crises and so forth. And up to this date, more than 60%, close to 70% of all world reserve currency holdings by central banks are in US dollars. Were that to fall away and people to abandon the dollar, such as the Chinese or, God forbid, the Japanese, who are still an occupied country by the US, if I may say, the loss of that support, that foreign support for the dollar, would create a situation where interest rates would be forced so high. I mean, how much public debt can the Federal Reserve take on its books without it becoming a joke? So the interest rates in the U.S. would become so high in order to dump this increasingly worthless debt in a debt-strapped economy. U.S. federal debt is over 100% of gross domestic product right now. Few people realize that. So then the United States would suddenly be not just in a fiscal cliff crisis, as is much talked about in these months. The United States would be in a crisis of actually funding foreign wars, of funding AFRICOM, of funding interventions, covert or overt, in the Arab Spring, or against Russia, or against China in the South China Sea, in the waters off of North Korea, in the seas off of Japan, and so forth. And that would literally become an existential threat for the future of the American century. The dollar, that being said, only survives right now by a series of financial warfares, economic warfares against Greece, against Euroland and whatnot, and they have resources to do this. The rating agencies are de facto captive of the US Treasury, de facto, Moody's, Standard & Poor's especially. And they simply do the downgrades as political interventions into the debt markets of Europe to every time there's some appearance of stability in the euro crisis. So they have enormous resources to bring to bear. The derivative holdings of the 6 to 8 largest banks of Wall Street, what I call in one of my books the gods of money, they have enormous powers to manipulate in the short-term world financial market. But in the long term, the prospects of the dollar, if you look at the state of the economy, if you look at the ascending debt to GDP ratios of the US government and so forth, the US is rapidly coming into a third world Argentina style 1980s debt crisis. And so the prospects, medium to long term, for the dollar are quite grim, given the current political realities in the US. The euro, on the other hand, I think the euro was a misconstruction from the inception. The idea of an imposed supranational financial dictatorship over 17 countries, or however many countries you want to include in it, was political from the beginning. It was designed by France, Italy, and Maggie Thatcher's England, and John Major after that, to tie Germany in, the German economic colossus, in to a European structure that the other Europeans would control, as they hoped. Well, the Germans twisted that to their advantage back around 1994, 95, and created a situation which, for a number of years, was very beneficial to German big industry. for the Mittelstand, the lifeblood of the German economy, the small and medium-sized industry, the situation was much bleaker, much more negative. But the big DAX 30 companies were able to create an export boom and using the euro to do so. But that is over, and now the euro has become a liability for all, including Germany. So I think at this point, if Merkel and the German powers that be are determined to hold the euro together at all costs until the September election, I think this is going to create dire consequences. It already has in countries like Greece, Portugal, Spain, and so forth, Italy. But look at the lack of forming a government in Italy is a direct result of a popular protest against the austerity of the Germany and the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. So I think the euro is an abortion from the beginning. It hasn't yet aborted, but it had the seeds of self-destruction built into it from the beginning because it was imposed without a political union as an underlying basis. I think the healthiest thing would be for different countries to leave the euro. It wouldn't be the end of the world, and to have a regime of floating exchange rates within bands where they floated against each other and stabilize the trade, and forget all this supranational structures that would create minding.